Hello again, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Autism Podcast. Before we get started with today's episode, be sure to check out our website, www.londonautismgroupcharity.org, where you can find exclusive information about our services, the chance to become a volunteer, and information about all of the community cafes that are hosted all across London, that is hosted by the founders themselves, James and Chris. You don't have to pay for anything to join. You don't have to sign any application forms. You literally just come in, have a tea or coffee, talk amongst other autistic people. You can speak to the founders, James and Chris, more about the charity itself. And if you're not autistic, you can just learn more about autism. And if you are autistic, it's just a safe space where you can just be yourself. With that said, onward with the show. But before we get into that, gotta welcome my co-host, Sophia Christophi, who's also in the call today. How's it going, Sophia?
Hey Simeon, good to be back for another episode. Really looking forward to talking to our guests today.
I am too. And speaking of that, coming to the stage, ladies and gentlemen, we have Helen Edgar, who is part of a company called Autistic Realms. Welcome to the show, Helen.
Hi, yeah, thank you very much. Very excited to be here. So thank you, Simeon and Sophia. Yeah, very excited to be here. As you said, yeah, so Autistic Realms isn't a company, it's literally just me. It's just my own single platform. There's nobody else around here. It's just me at home with
Oh,
my two children. But yeah, I'm writing and creating prolifically. So yeah,
fair enough. We love a one-woman show. That's just the dedication is real, you know?
it's very monotropic. You can get onto my
Yes.
sister.
And that's something that I really hope we'll get the opportunity to talk about today as well, as I know that that's kind of a personal passion of yours. But before we do that, could you please tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and the work that you do?
Yeah, so I'm Helen Edgar. I'm late identified AuDHD. That came, yeah, very, very late in my life, in my 40s, after kind of years of misdiagnosis and kind of mental health difficulties and struggling and never really knowing why, really. I've got two children who are both autistic and multiply neurodivergent. And wasn't really until my own children started going down the pathway for assessments after they were struggling in school that I started thinking, oh, we're all quite similar here in this family. And I started noticing things that I just hadn't considered were autistic traits, really, just because of the way autism's been portrayed in society, despite the fact that I was a teacher working very specifically within special education in the UK in Birmingham. I hadn't kind of related it to myself for many, many, many years. Yes, I worked as an early years primary teacher, mostly with children with profound and multiple learning disabilities. That's my background. I did that for 20 years. And then I resigned from teaching due to my own children's needs, who were unable to attend school for the very familiar story that I think a lot of parents of autistic children can relate to, just barriers to education, fighting for EHCPs, accommodations. And it just got to the stage where I had to resign. And when I resigned, been very active on social media my whole life. I've always been in online parent forums and such like, and I've gathered an awful lot of information over the years that I'd kind of been sharing in groups and learning from other people. And then one day I just decided to start collating it all together. And I started putting stuff together in blogs and collating research and making infographics. And yeah, I think it was 2020, the end of 2022, I set up Autistic Realms one night, and the next morning I put out a blog, and a couple of weeks later, that blog had kind of gone viral about autistic burnout, and it just carried on from there. It just kept spinning out. Really, I just kept meeting amazing people in the community and learning from others.
Amazing. Yeah, if you can, please do check out Autistic Realms online on the various platforms. We will also have links to it in the description of this episode, but there's lots of really, really good resources available. You mentioned burnout. Is that something we could talk a little bit more about?
Yeah, so discovering that there was a term called autistic burnout was kind of life-changing for myself. Prior to kind of being involved in the autistic community, I wasn't aware of autistic burnout even being a real thing. Looking back on my own journey of kind of mental health difficulties and depression and anxiety and cycles of burnout periods through my own life and work, and never really knowing why. It suddenly kind of became clear, and I just started a huge deep dive into autistic burnout. When I started researching it, I think in 2022, when I set up Autistic Realms, there was literally only 3 or 4 research papers internationally. Like, it just wasn't really talked about. It wasn't understood. It's still not massively understood by professionals and kind of GPs and everything now, but I think there's been a huge shift over the past kind of 18 months, 2 years or so. It's becoming more widely recognised as people are relating to it and finding ways to help manage their lives, and recognising the impact that burnout has on people is profound, really. And it can start really early in life. The pressures for masking and conforming into for neuronormative ways starts very, very early on in life. Like, I think it's Kieran Rose who says, like, even babies are learning to mask because they're learning how to comply and what gives, the positive feedback from adults. And then as soon as children start in early years, all of that's often reinforced, and people and children's natural autistic ways of being are often denied, encouraged to do like good listening, good sitting, to play in certain ways, to speak and communicate in certain ways, and all of that is kind of behaviourist approaches, and the sticker reward charts and the social stories that start very, very early on have a huge impact on children as they're growing up, to the point that as they get further on through school, it just becomes too much, and they've got loads of problems with mental health, managing their education, even going to school, and school attendance issues, and it just spirals. So I think it starts very, very early on in life, with people trying to make people fit into the norms, as opposed to thinking of ways. What we really need to do is be changing the environment. I love Luke Bearden's equation of autism plus environment equals outcome. Luke Bearden's so this is going to turn into a huge info dump. Luke Bearden's a lecturer at Sheffield University. He's written lots of books about supporting autistic young people and adults. And I just love that equation because it just sums up everything about what we need, how we need to move forward and be more neurodiversity affirming. But it's about thinking of ways we can, change the environment, as opposed to trying to make people fit in and fix them to fit into other ways of being.
I mean, if I'm honest with you, it's just one thing I've come to realize, being in the community myself and learning more about myself and hearing about other autistic people's stories, is that I've yet to find one person who is autistic where masking and burnout hasn't been apparent in their lives. I know that there's a whole bunch of traits that come with being autistic, and not everyone shares the same traits, but masking is just something that I think every autistic person experiences. I mean, I've yet to find someone who hasn't had any experience of what it feels like to not mask, and they can just be themselves and not feel like they have to conform to anything, and having the pressures of that being a complete and utter issue in their lives is something that we all experience, unfortunately. And it's something that makes us at the London Autism Group charity make us so passionate to make a change and let people be themselves, because we all live in a world where it's not built for us. And just going from what you're saying and the amount of other guests who have told us their masking stories, and even myself and Sophia's masking stories, it definitely does motivate us to do the things that we do, and help people and learn that it is okay to be yourself in a world that doesn't truly accept you for who you really are, and lets those autistic people know that it is okay to be who you are. You don't have to follow a particular blueprint or archetype to fit in and be accepted. You can just be accepted for who you are. The only thing I would recommend for that is obviously just find the right people that you align with and who is willing to get to know you for who you are. Because unfortunately, there's some people out there who won't have any interest in getting to know you for the person that you truly are. They will want to know the masked you. And the second you start showing your true self, that's when they start backing away. I mean, the previous guest, Jenny Lochran, she mentioned about how her
From
son,
Autistic Revolution, Jenny.
yes,
Yeah,
actually, oh yeah,
yeah,
you know
yeah,
about her. Okay, yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yes, we had
Yeah.
she was literally the previous guest, which by the way, listeners, check out her episode once you're done with this one, obviously. But she told us a story about when her son was becoming more of himself with his friends in quotation marks, his friends started disappearing. And that's something that is very saddening to hear that, when you've been around people that you know and you've gone to know them, and then the second they start showing who the people that who they really are, that's when they start changing and not want to be around you.
Yeah, I think the whole conversation around masking is really important. I really love, yeah, I've been reading both Dr. Devon Price's books and Kieran Rose and Amy Pearson's book on autistic masking. Kieran Rose's book in particular really stood out for me because I think it brought home the aspect of privilege that comes with unmasking and needing those safe spaces and safe people to be around. But yeah, so I think going back to what we were saying about masking, I think yeah, there's a lot of privilege that there's a whole. I think there's a big pressure, especially online and places like Facebook and Instagram, where people say, "Oh, you need, if you're autistic, we need to learn to unmask, be your authentic selves." You find out that you're autistic, and then you have to kind of go through this process of almost de-shedding and unraveling yourself and demasking. And I think it's really, really complex. It's not as easy as that. Just you can't just demask. Masking is also a safety mechanism. It's a way to keep us as safe as well. And just unmasking in some places isn't safe. I think it's also a way of preserving ourselves. And I think when we're talking about masking or unmasking, and being our authentic selves and having been able to, I think it's being able to choose when to unmask and when to mask. I think that's what's really, really important. And that's what can be really empowering for us kind of moving forward. It's not just a matter of unmasking, it's a matter of hopefully getting to that place where you're in a safe community, where you've got spaces and kind of pockets and people where you can be yourself, and find ways to be yourself. I mean, certainly when I was identified as autistic, I think this is a really common story, but you're suddenly left with like, oh my goodness, like who am I? What have I been doing for the past like 30, 40 years? And I think a lot of people come to late identification through periods of like really intense burnout and mental health issues and anxiety and depression, thinking that maybe things will get easier when you've got your autism diagnosis in a way when you find out you're autistic. But it's still a journey. It continues to be a journey. I think it's always going to be a journey of finding out more about yourself and kind of digging deeper into those layers, because the layers of internalized ableism and everything that's gone on it's really deep. It's not as easy. You can't just like, it's literally taking off a mask work. It's a lot of unlearning and relearning different ways of being. And I think for myself personally, and that's why I'm so involved in the autistic community, I enjoy kind of sharing and helping other people, but also I'm getting a lot back from learning from other people as well. Personally, that's how I've found out so much about, yeah, learning from other people's experiences and their stories of burnout and masking and ways their sensory systems work, and then thinking about my own and other people's. I think it's collaborating with other people and sharing stories is really, really powerful and very validating, and it helps you kind of learn a bit more about your identity.
So you mentioned that you've been on social media for quite some time. How has the autistic community online changed over time?
Yeah, so I've been like, I think without realizing I was autistic, I've always felt better in online spaces than kind of going out to, I don't know, out with my friends, like to pubs and clubs and restaurants and stuff. I've always found that the online community has just always felt like a kind of home to me. I was in internet cafes in Birmingham, like in the late 90s, like with dial-up tones.
Your internet cafes, I
Paying
haven't
by the
heard that in a long time.
yeah,
That
like
takes
paying
me
by
back.
the 30 minutes to join a chat forum, paying by like the hour and stuff. As far as the autistic community goes, I think my own personal relationship with that has really changed quite a lot. As I said, initially I've been in a lot of groups and spaces as a parent seeking support and meeting other parents before I realised I was autistic myself. So I was there kind of seeking advice for my own children and in the capacity of a teacher as well, like looking for support for the children in my class as well, and sharing ideas and resources. And yeah, since I've set up Autistic Realms, and I've met some like amazing people, like you just mentioned, you were interviewing Jenny from Autistic Revolution the other day. I know you've had an episode with David Gray Hammond, Emergent Divergence, and kind of connecting with all these other autistic advocates and organisations like yourself. I do a lot of work with Stimpunks as well. It's really just opened my eyes just to the need that's out there. I think that's what's really changed. There's a few things that's changed. There's been a huge shift towards people recognizing the harm of behaviourist practice and ABBA and PBS, positive behaviour support strategies. I think that's been one really big shift that's slowly starting to creep into far more spaces, and people talking about the importance of being neurodiversity affirming. There's more people aware of the neurodiversity paradigm in itself. That certainly wasn't a conversation that was just kind of talked about regularly a few years ago, with many people, but that's a lot of people understand a lot more understanding of things like the double empathy problem now. I think it used to probably be just kind of within academic circles for quite a long time, but I think the more groups I'm in, like the training courses and webinars, it's the double empathy problem, which, if people haven't heard about it, that was developed by Damien Milton, who's a researcher in 2012. They came up with the double empathy problem, and it explains the differences between autistic people, for example, and non-autistic people. And their different life experiences can cause communication differences. It doesn't have to just be autistic and non-autistic. It can be differences between any kind of intersection of society and two different people trying to communicate. But I think things like that is becoming more common knowledge in just generally out there in the community, but also within kind of teaching groups, teacher training. There's been a general shift towards people moving to understanding the importance of being neurodiversity affirming, as opposed to just kind of saying, oh, we're inclusive, we're very, we're all inclusive, we're special needs aware and autism aware. There's a bit of a deeper understanding of the importance of understanding neurodiversity and intersectionality and the impact that can have on people. So I think with regards to how it's changed, I think it's a lot busier at the moment. There's been a huge surge, especially in places like Facebook and Blue Sky and various and Discord channels. There's been like an explosion really of different groups emerging and support groups, parent advocacy groups, which is amazing, but it also highlights the challenges that people are having, where people are really seeking out so much support for, especially for young people who are struggling with education. The statistics are just crazy with like school attendance and mental health referrals to CAMHS are just skyrocketing, and especially since the COVID lockdowns and stuff like that, that's like exacerbated everything even further, for a lot of people. So it's positive in some ways, but it also shows there's a real need for people wanting to find out more. And as more people find out about a more neuroaffirming presentation of autistic experiences, I think a lot of people are relating it to their own lives, like later in life. So then they're getting diagnosed later in life, and it all kind of spirals and propels itself.
I think it's also kind of about trying to extend that information outside of our community as well.
Yeah.
I've definitely noticed a huge increase, as you said, in the kind of there's much more of a vast representation now, which is great because when I was first diagnosed, and I was kind of looking for stuff online. Some of the descriptions didn't really fit me. They were very kind of stereotypical or based on a male representation
Yeah,
of
it's
autism.
kind of the Canna version of autism and
Yeah,
that.
exactly. So now there's so many kind of different autistic people, there's so many different perspectives, but there's still, particularly in education, such barriers for autistic young people in education. Occasionally, I hear of things like within an EHCP plan, one of the targets being to make more eye contact. And I just think, oh, if they were aware of the amount of autistic people online and the information that we can provide and share, we wouldn't still be having these really outdated targets. So, yeah, I think the autistic community online is incredible. And I just want to find a way to get people from the outside to
Yeah,
sort
I
of,
think it is happening. I'm kind of eternally optimistic, but I think places like the Anefoid organisation are doing like tremendous work in the educational setting with their kind of their teacher training programs and their the training for practitioners. And I think there's more resources out there for autistic adults in the workplace now. Thriving Autistic are doing really, really good work around that, and there's lots more just organisations and advocates kind of creating stuff. The amount of information out there now is vast, really. It's almost overwhelming at times. There's so much out there you just don't always know where to go. But I think that it is changing, and I think things are getting moving from the autistic community, yeah, into there's still a huge amount way we have to go, but I think things are changing. The more people understand about autism, I think they're able to advocate for those changes and accommodations that are needed as well. I think we're a long way from kind of any kind of utopia like Luke Bearden talked about, or any kind of new queering future. But yeah, I think things are slowly starting to change, and that's really, really positive. Definitely.
100%. And I think one of the reasons for why it's starting to change as well is because obviously one thing that you kind of brought up was about how people in the past, whenever they're trying to find information, it was very stereotypical. And just hearing from that, I definitely believe the reason because of that is simply this information is coming from people who aren't autistic. They don't know any kind of experience living in the mind of an autistic person. So the fact that there's so much information now, I believe, is because more and more autistic people are coming out with their stories and their experiences, and it relates to other autistic people. So it obviously brings that connecting space. And Sophia, my favorite message is about to come. Hope you guys are ready. This is exactly the reason why every episode I always say about how important it is to understand yourself. And just like you said, it's extremely hard to do 100%. I know because I've been spending the last 5 years understanding myself, and obviously I still have difficulties. I mean, I definitely got way more of an understanding now based on my experiences and what I've actually learned about myself. But it's taken, as I said, 5 years of deprogramming my internalized ableism and all the negative thoughts about and all the masking habits that I used to do. And it's something that is embarked in my subconscious. It was and in everyone's subconscious for a long time, especially if you've been masking your whole life. Just taking off the mask one day is obviously not possible, but I can give you an example because if one thing I've always mentioned, I always said about, understand yourself and learn about yourself and everything. But I can give you an example because this is actually something that happened today with me because we were talking about burnout earlier. At work, is I've noticed this week I was extremely burnt out, and the main reason was once again because I'm quite new to this job that I'm working at in IT, and I am still kind of processing the new policies and processes that we have to do, and I'm not the fastest when it comes to processing information. Obviously, it's pretty standard of being autistic, and what ended up happening was I've been getting criticized quite a lot by my boss because I'm not, following the processes or I'm missing out certain information and everything. And I was starting to get really burnt out by that because not only was I processing everything that's going on around me, I'm also having the fact that I've been criticized a few times because of me not being able to understand and get the process right as quickly as he's hoping to. And today we had a meeting, and I was definitely for a long time just, fixating and fixating and fixating over that information and trying to be understood by my boss. Because I tried to tell him exactly what the reasons behind it is. And what I come to find out is that because of those fixations that was happening in my mind, I noticed the real reason why I always fixate over stuff is because I am trying desperately to find a rationalization for why I'm feeling like this. And what I kind of see it sometimes is like a crying child in a way that's just trying to be heard. And so if I just sit with myself and just know with myself that I am acknowledged, because I notice whenever I feel unheard, that's when the meltdowns happen and stuff like that. So if I realize, as long as I hear myself and I just kind of sit down and process it in a quiet space where no one is around, my brain does start to calm down and start to find those rationalizations. And it definitely helps me function better.
I go off on lots of tangents with Autistic Realms, but the main focus of Autistic Realms is generally, I try and keep it towards kind of family and education stuff, but I do spin off onto lots of other areas, such as neuroqueering things and random stuff about all kinds of random subjects. What I've recently been looking at is the idea of reclaiming rest tied into autistic burnout, and I think that's like what you were talking about there of there's often a real need that we feel the way society is set up is that we have to meet these expectations, which have been set up kind of by the neuro majority of people. We have to keep going. We have to, yeah, meet all those kind of deadlines in work. You know, there's such pressure, but on top of being autistic, on top of the masking and everything else. And I think that's what can, yeah, burnout really, really, really difficult and cause that kind of chronic exhaustion from masking and sensory overwhelm and unmet needs and just completely reduced capacity. But I think what's also kind of stigmatized is the concept of rest in itself. I've been looking at this may be a bit of a tangent for you. So I've been looking at the Nap Ministry by Tricia Hersey, and I'm really kind of inspired by that as a way of reclaiming. She's not writing from an autistic perspective, but I think it's very interesting to talk about within kind of neurodivergent ways of being and living. Is for us to find ways to reclaim meaningful rest for us. There's often an idea that we should be resting in certain ways, especially if you're burnt out or you're and it leads to depression. You go to the doctors and they say, oh, you need to be going out for a walk every day. Why don't you need to be socializing more? It's no good just kind of locking yourself in your room because that's going to lead to a deeper depression. But for autistic people, I think rest in itself can look really, really different. Our ways of resting, personally for me, my ways of resting, certainly not going out and socializing and talking to people. That depletes me even more. I kind of joined your podcast today, as I said. I'm really grateful for the opportunity, and I do love being able to talk about things like this, and I love doing my webinars. But I'm my natural space is in my writing when I'm not talking and I'm just by myself and I'm just reading and writing. I find that energizing. That's my way of resting. A lot of people don't understand that. Like it's like you get told, oh, just you need to stop working. You're just always on the computer. You're always working. I was the same when I was like doing my classroom work as well. I just lived for what I was doing in the classroom. That was my complete joy. That was what kind of gave me energy and made me want to kind of get up in the morning and go to work. And then in the evenings, I was just planning and creating activities for the children in my class and really deep diving kind of monotropically. And we can maybe have a chat about monotropism because I think ways of resting, if you're a monotropic person, if you relate to the theory of monotropism, is different. And your rest may mean maybe kind of deep diving into those interests, and for other people that may look like you're kind of working non-stop, but it's actually energizing, and kind of the other side of it is kind of being more in tune with your sensory system. So resting may be, for some people it may be going on kind of long runs and stuff, and certainly for my children their resting sometimes involves just jumping on the trampoline for hours, which certainly isn't my way of resting. But like kind of weighted blankets and sensory lights as a way of recharging your system is a meaningful way of resting that's often misunderstood as meaningful rest, and often used as a kind of, certainly for children in many school settings, kind of sensory rooms and stuff are used as after people have kind of had like a crisis, whereas we need to be incorporating more rest into our lives to enable us to thrive, as opposed to resting, for a purpose to be able to carry on with more work. There needs to be an understanding of rest. Sorry, that's a total random.
No, that's
No, I believe,
brilliant.
yeah, yeah,
I
definitely
think
relate.
Restless resistance is what I've been writing about, like reclaiming the idea of rest, because it's so often kind of pathologized, it's denied to us as neurodivergent people, and I think reclaiming rest is a way of reclaiming our identity and our need for a different way of resting, and a different way of restoring our energy and our spoons, however you want to talk about it. And it challenges those ideas of what productivity looks like for neurodivergent people and autistic people. And our productivity may look different. Our ways of managing our time is different. And I think it's really interesting to talk about that, and how we can kind of, resist some of that and go against those ableist norms as a way of embracing our identity. I think it's really, really empowering.
Well
Yeah,
said.
I can really relate to the example that you gave about kind of that intense research. For me, that is my idea of kind of relaxing, is to hyper focus on a particular interest. And I think to other people, it does look like constant work, but actually, I get so much enjoyment from finding out new things that that's where I feel most comfortable and at ease.
Yeah, it's rejuvenating for me, and yeah, often the more kind of stressed I am, the more I will write. So the people that kind of know me really well will know, like, if I'm churning out like 10 blogs a week, I'm having a really stressful week. It's not actually that great of a thing to be celebrating. It means I'm having a really hard time. I think I wrote a 3,000 word blog yesterday morning before like my lunch or something, and I was like, "Ah," but it's what I needed to do. And then once I got that out of my system, I was like, "Ah, right, I
It's
can."
like a venting space in a way, isn't it, for you?
Yeah, it's part of. I really resonate with the theory of monotropism, and yeah, it's part. It's a huge. The more I've understood about the theory of monotropism, um, it's just helped me know, and I resonate. It was just completely enlightening. I resonate more with the theory of monotropism than any kind of other theory of autism, ADHD out there. It kind of encapsulates everything for me about my experience.
I mean, if I'm honest with you, like, I do believe that monotropism definitely is integrated in a lot of autistic people anyway, because I mean, just like what Sophia was saying, and even myself, I definitely resonate with monotropism as you were talking, because that's something that I like to do. But there's so many times where I just don't want to be around anybody. And I've been called so many times in my life antisocial because I'm always the quiet one. I don't like to speak to people all the time. And from the outside, it looks like I'm just this very antisocial person. And in some cases, yes, I am. But obviously I do like to talk, I do like to have conversations, but I'm the type of person where if I want to have a conversation, I want it to be meaningful. I want it to have some sort of substance. I don't like having these kind of small talks, surface level conversations. I like to go deeper into topics. And if I'm around people who just aren't capable of that, not that there's anything wrong with them, because they're just not interested in that sort of stuff. But for me, I get drained by being around people that when I'm not talking about something deeper. And it's the same thing when if I am by myself, I like to, listen to music. I like to create playlists. I like to list out my top 10 favorite songs of, my favorite artists and my top 100 favorite albums of all time. These are the things that I like to do in my own free time whenever I'm just by myself, just doing my own thing. And there's nothing wrong with that. And I think one thing that the listeners really need to take note of just from hearing Helen speaking here is that, everyone has their own way of expressing themselves, whether you're autistic or not. Your way of expressing yourself could be writing 3,000 words like Helen does, or it could be, what did you say, Sophia?
Researching sort of an intense interest.
Yeah,
Yeah, or it could be
researching
just like
literally
playing with like
anything,
your squidgy sensory toys, or just staring at your ceiling at a galaxy, like whatever happens. I think the thing with the theory of monotropism is, would you like me to give a bit of a background of monotropism, or?
Yeah, I was just thinking maybe for some of our listeners who perhaps have not heard of monotropism before, could you give us kind of an overview of the theory?
and how it would relate to people on the spectrum as well, because it's definitely something that I believe a lot of people would follow.
Yeah, so the theory of monotropism was developed by there were actually autistic researchers in the late 1990s, Dinah Murray, Mike Lesser, and Wen Lawson. They developed the idea of monotropism, which then led to the research paper which came out in 2005. So we're talking about a long time ago now. It's almost like 30 years ago that it's kind of been trickling around in some kind of academic circles a little bit. But it wasn't until really the monotropism questionnaire came out, which was developed by Valeria Garrow and her team in 2023, that the kind of theory of monotropism literally kind of exploded online. And the theory of monotropism, it was developed as a theory of the neurodiversity strength-based theory of autism, where monotropic people tend to have their attention pulled more strongly towards a smaller number of interests at any time, which then leaves fewer resources for other processes. And for me, like, that explains every aspect of my own autistic experience. And like what you were saying about difficulties with communication, it helps explain the double empathy problem. Because if you're focusing on one aspect of a conversation, then that's going to leave less processing resources to pick up on maybe tone of voice, facial expression, body language. And then if you add more people into a group, like the more people you have, like in a group setting as opposed to one-to-one, that's going to further deplete your energy resources, and you're going to have to keep splitting your attention to kind of make sense of all of that, which is exhausting, on top of also thinking, oh, how am I actually sounding? And you're masking and trying to fit into that social situation. So yeah, that's the theory of monotropism has been around for quite a long time now. And the monotropism questionnaire, which came out in 2023, if you go to monotropism.org or autisticrealms.com, there's links to the questionnaire on there if you wanted to find out your own score. But the people who actually scored the highest from the research, the cohort with the highest monotropic scores were actually those that were autistic and ADHD. So it's the AuDHDers that actually scored higher in the monotropism questionnaire, which I found really interesting. And yeah, it's not exclusive maybe just to autism either, or ADHD. There were some people who may identify as not being autistic, who may also have a higher score of monotropism, although you maybe want to question whether they'd need to look further into their identity if they were scoring really highly. I don't know, but it's certainly very interesting with the overlaps of different types of neurodivergence as well, and how monotropism impacts sensory processing, the interoception system, the way we communicate, language, social skills, all of that. I think there is some misconception around that monotropism is just about kind of autistic special interests and passions. And yeah, that's a misconception, because it's far it's far more than that. It's far more than just deep passions and interests. It's about where your attention is being pulled more strongly towards at any given time. So that could be just for fleeting moments of like sensory experiences. Like I can just see I'm sat in my room here, and I've got a blackout blind, and there's like some light coming through, and I've got my fairy lights on. So it's how your attention pulls you towards those certain experiences, as well as the importance of monotropic focus and deep passions and interests, and that joy that you were talking about there as well before.
That might explain why it seems that a lot of AuDHD uh people tend to score higher in the monotropic from what you were saying about where their attention is drawn to. Because obviously a lot of people with ADHD, they tend to, focus their attention on different things at different times. And when they're autistic as well, obviously they have that fixated portion of themselves. So I've heard from a couple of people who are ADHD that it's like they have two sides of them, the autistic side and the ADHD side. And when they kind of come together, it's like a combination of that. So from what you're talking about, would you say that might explain why
Yeah,
ADHD?
I think so. There's Fergus. I work quite closely with Fergus Murray. Fergus Murray developed the monotropism.org website. It was Fergus's mum. It was Dynamo, the original one of the original researchers. And Fergus has written extensively about monotropism. And one of the things they've written about, they've got these 6 points that they've kind of collated, which I think really help explain the theory of monotropism, the positives and also the challenges of being monotropic. And those 6 points, if you want me to talk about them, the first one is that coping with multiple channels can be really difficult for autistic people, because we're talking about essentially monotropism. The way I'm kind of interpreting it is about your attentional resources, it's your energy resources. So the more input that a person's got in their environment, like sensory input. So if you think of a child in a classroom, for example, with all the noise, the smells, the colourful boards everywhere, maybe, the demands from a teacher giving lots of sets of instructions all at once, their friends being next to them, plus maybe being dysregulated because of like sensory tags on their clothes, all of that. There's a lot going on, which can be really, really, really overwhelming. So coping with multiple channels is really hard. So the often reducing demands, reducing sensory input to meet a person's needs is going to be helpful. It's helpful for everybody, whether they're autistic or not, but especially for autistic people. And when we're thinking about it through the theory of monotropism, it's especially beneficial because it gives you less, you don't need to keep splitting your kind of attentional energy up. Tanya Adkins has come up with the idea of monotropic split, which I think is really interesting, because if you're having to split your attention, that's exhausting, and then that can lead to, over time, if you're not getting enough, if you're not reclaiming your rest, that can lead to burnout. Their second point that Fergus made was that filtering can be tricky and error prone. Again, that kind of builds on what I was saying before, that it's really hard to sometimes tune things out when you're trying to focus on some tasks, whereas other times, I think as Sophia was saying, you might be so deeply absorbed in a task that everything else around you just seems to melt away, including time. So like 3 minutes might end up being like 3 hours worth of time. You suddenly look at your clock and you're like, oh, I haven't eaten, I haven't gone to the toilet, because you're so deeply absorbed. It's like all consuming interest and passion, to the point where your interoception system, like whether you feel hungry, you need the toilet, whether you're in pain. But I've sat in some really weird positions for like hours, like my legs have gone numb, and you would try and stand up and you're falling over because you've got pins and needles and you haven't been to the toilet and you haven't eaten or drank for hours, because I've just been like so absorbed in what I'm doing. So I think that's something worth considering if you relate to that. Their third point is that changing tracks, if you're monotropic or autistic, can be really destabilizing. Like task switching is hard. I like to think of it, being monotropic is like having like tunnels of attention, and it takes a lot of energy to move and kind of, if you imagine like a train and changing tracks to change direction, it takes a lot of effort, it takes a lot of energy to change plans. So when we're thinking of, I'll relate it back to kind of children in school again, but when we're talking about children in school where it's often high demand. And there's a lot of time pressure. They've got to get on to the next lesson, This work's got to be finished here. Open your books on this page and put everything away. Now move on to this. You're going into a different classroom with a different teacher, with a different subject. And autistic people, that's really, really hard. It's exhausting. And that leads some people to try and suppress all of their kind of inner needs, which can lead to that kind of after school burnout and meltdown, which is very, very, very common for other children. Like, it's leading to kind of meltdowns and shutdowns and what's classed as kind of challenging behaviour in the classroom, because they're unable to cope. Like, the environment isn't meeting their needs because the expectations, the demands are too high for people to process in the ways that they need. There's often a lot more time and cushioning around things which is needed to help transition through the day. So I'm going off at a complete info dump here. I'm only on point 3. I've got 6 points. Would you like me to go through the 6
Yeah,
points?
we already started, so you might as well stop.
Yeah.
I mean, you
I
might as well
can't
keep going.
stop on number 3, can I?
No, you can't. It'd be like,
Um,
look, the audience will be like, wait, no, I wanted to hear number 4.
okay. Yeah, so the change in tracks is really destabilizing. And I think, there's I think it's somebody called EOS, E is for Erin or something, has done like the tendrils of thought. Like, imagine like an octopus kind of with loads of tendrils kind of pulling at you all the time, and trying to navigate all of that and control it is exhausting. So point 4 is leading on to how intense things can be if you're as an autistic person. I think this is something everybody will kind of relate to. But those things that are intense are usually related to, it can be things of interest, that can be something negative or positive. I think if you're monotropic, because the way you're processing everything intensely into like narrower channels, so to speak. If you're not autistic, your attention is likely to be more widely dispersed and spread out, whereas autistic people's, you can't see me, but I'm moving my hands closer together here. People's attention tends to be kind of more compressed into narrower attention tunnels that go deeper. So interests and thought processes tend to go deeper as opposed to being more dispersed, and that can affect things positively and negatively, as I said. So if you're hooked into something really positively, like Sophia was saying, like with her research, that can be a really joyful experience. Or if you're, I don't know, whatever you happen to be interested in, whether it's kind of stimming with a squishy toy or whatever it happens to be, or going on, I don't know, a walk in the park, whatever it'll be with your pet. But also if your attention locks into something less positive and you start ruminating and reliving things, you can get kind of locked into that attention tunnel as well. I think that explains a lot of, it can be really hard to get out of those cycles. I think potentially that could help explain lots of kind of anxiety and ruminating thoughts and looping thoughts, and possibly for some people that could also help explain kind of OCD type of traits as well, which leads on to their point 5, which is the looping back to interests and concerns. So it can be really hard to let things drop sometimes, because you're constantly pulled back to the same loops and conversations. Yeah, when we're talking about like being able to kind of that state of inertia that you can get in, where you may be unable to move on from something, unable to start a new project or get up to boil the kettle or something. You kind of just sat there thinking, oh, I'm really thirsty, but you're still just sat there. You can't kind of get to the next step to do something about that. And that can be really difficult. And it seems to be a really common thing that a lot of people talk about, is that state of inertia and kind of being able to finish things or move on or start things, all of that. Starting, finishing is really hard. The middle bit is normally where people kind of find their flow state, so to speak, and finding ways for us to kind of navigate those flow states within us and to make those flow states easier to help transitions is what we need to think of. And certain things that I've learned by being in the community has been really helpful for that. Like I'd never heard of like body doubling until the past few years, but certainly body doubling for me online in online communities where I've got somebody, not necessarily always on a video call with me, but just somebody to kind of say, oh, I'm going to start to do, I don't know, I can, whether it's house cleaning or whether it's something actually work related where I need to, I don't know, write a report or something like that. It gives that accountability of somebody doing something with you, and it can be really helpful to manage that inertia of starting projects that may be a little bit more difficult to start sometimes, just having somebody there with you. And I think body doubling is a very neurodivergent, positive way of working. It certainly works for me. The last point in this long list, sorry, this is a real info dump. The last point that Fergus made, which I think is really interesting, is that if you're monotropic, then as we talked about, those deep interests, you're kind of fully immersed, whether it's a sensory experience, whether it's a more negative kind of ruminating thought that's looping, or whether it's a deep interest in your passions and interests. What tends to happen is, because all of your energy and attentional resources are focused on that thing, or those few things at any one time, which means that generally everything else just seems to disappear, which can make executive functioning things really, really difficult. 'Cause it's almost like once it's out of your sight, it's out of mind, like literally. And I think that helps explain loads of executive functioning issues and why many neurodivergent people find it very difficult to manage their daily lives, like manage like cooking and cleaning and timings of things. I've got timers and alarms going off all over the place to keep things on task, and to make sure that my attention is diverted back onto that thing. You know, if you're cooking fish fingers, I'll put them into the grill, I'll go back to what I was doing, and then it's like, oh, then the timer goes off, or the fire alarm goes off if I forgot to put the timer on. So it's thinking of ways to help manage kind of those executive function tasks, and ways to manage things that may be outside of your attention tunnel at any given time. And for children in school, there's lots of strategies we can do to help them kind of learn these things that maybe weren't around, certainly when we were younger, because they weren't really recognized or known about. We were expected just to kind of conform and fit in to those timetables and ways of being.
Well, guys, I'm really hoping you guys were taking notes there because that was definitely some really interesting points. I'm pretty sure everyone listening at least related to one of those points, at least one. But what would you say, Sophia, is do you relate to any of these points that, Helen has mentioned?
Yeah, I can relate to several of those, particularly sort of the whole idea of having sort of fewer tunnels, but then being much deeper. So when I kind of focus my attention on something, I can't just do it a little bit. I have to kind of be really, really detailed in what I'm looking at.
It
Um,
tends to be like all or nothing, because so like
yeah,
last year I developed, it's hard to talk about this on a podcast because you need a visual, I'm really sorry, but if you look on my website or Steampunk's website, I developed the map of monotropic experiences, which is a visual representation of kind of how I experience monotropism. It kind of covers all of what we've been discussing here about I mean, I've given them all kind of, it's a cute map. It's like a cartoony map, if you've seen it or not. It covers like attention tunnels and rabbit holes of research, and kind of, I've got it here in front of me. The river of monotropic flow states, burnout whirlpools, kind of the panic hills of low object permanence, which is where we're talking about when things kind of go out of your attention tunnel, and the benefits of like the beach of body doubling. It's called, if people are interested, there's a really fun map that you may like to look at.
if
um,
I'm not mistaken, has that also been developed into a training program?
Yeah, so Stimpunks and I, so stimpunks.org, yeah, we've developed some free open source training about the map of monotropic experiences. I created a 60-page workbook. It's all out there for the community to use. The training's free and everything. So yeah, have a look. There's been a lot of interest from all different people, really. There's been a lot of therapists that are interested in using it. with different communities, just as a starting point, really, to talk about what we're talking about here. Like, does it resonate? How does it resonate with you? What's different? You know, when we're talking about like flow state, what does your flow state look like? Like, how do you get into a good flow state? Like, what could restrict you? What leads you into the burnout whirlpools? Like, what are those barriers? I mean, my map of monotropic experience is like an island. It's surrounded by what I've called the shark infested waters of neuronormative domination and behaviorism, which I feel is like just literally surrounding us, and cyclones of unmet needs. And it's how all of those kind of impact us. But within this, we've got our community. And the more we find out about our identity and being able to kind of meet with other people, share stories and validate those experiences, I think it can be really, really empowering, and a way of restoring the autistic kind of narrative away from that deficit model towards something meaningful that people can relate to, and something that's affirming and that can support their lives in a positive way.
Yeah, so I guess it's like harnessing the strengths that come with having a monotropic mind, but also putting in kind of coping strategies
Yeah,
for
yeah. I
some
mean,
of the
it's
difficulties
difficult.
that come
It's not
about.
like all kind of rainbow and glitter. Certainly not being. It's really hard, and it's hard because we're living in the society that we're living in, with all the challenges that we've got in the systems that we've got, that we're having to kind of battle against. You know, like, as I said, I was a teacher for 20 years. My training was behaviorist based. That's what we did, and that's what people generally know about. It is shifting, but we're still where we are. My children are not in school. I'm having to kind of educate them at home, and I'm one of thousands of tens of thousands of families that are experiencing this now. So yeah, it's really difficult. But there are definitely, the more we know about autistic experience and share stories with others, and we have the work from autistic researchers, which is what's really interesting about the theory of monotropism, is that it was developed by a team of autistic research, and there's more research coming out now from actually autistic researchers. And there was a paper, I think it came out on last Friday, I think, by David Jackson Perry, about the benefits of academia embracing, an unknowing of academia is what they were talking about in their paper, and listening to community voices, and how kind of academic research needs to branch out and incorporate things like your podcast, for example, and blogs and music and art and different ways that people are expressing themselves. Not just the people who are able to read and write, but there's many forms of ways of people being able to express themselves, including those from those with profound and multiple learning disabilities. We need to be listening to their voices as well. I think that's really, really important, and tuning into people and giving people space to express themselves, and get and have that validation.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think particularly things like journal articles can be so inaccessible to so many people. I have a background in psychology. I did my PhD as well, and I used to sometimes come across journal articles that I would read and think, this is so complex. How is anybody supposed to understand this? And I often also noticed that I could tell which papers were written by people who are not autistic about autistic people and which ones were co-produced with autistic people.
Yeah, I think that's
So
been
it
the really
really,
big shift, hasn't it? Is that there's
yeah,
a shift away from research being done on us and to
yeah,
us, as opposed to by
with us.
us and with us. Like
Yes,
with us and by us, either in both. Yeah, it's really important.
So
yeah.
Helen, just I think Sophia was wanted to continue
Oh yeah,
her
thank
point.
you.
So yeah, basically I was just agreeing with you in that kind of there has been a change within academia as well, and lots more autism researchers. And I think that's really helping. But I do agree that there needs to be that information needs to be more accessible so that it does reach wider audiences and isn't kind of just kept behind a journal paywall that nobody's going to read and nobody's going to have access to.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think what was interesting in the paper that I read by David Jackson Perry was that was their call for research, not just to include academic stuff, so to include the autistic voices from the community as well, like blogs and YouTubes and whatever people are sharing out there, cartoons and stuff, it's all valid. It's people's stories, it's people's journeys, and that needs to be recognized and kind of cited and credited for people and valued. I think it's highly valued within our community, but it needs to be valued much wider really and recognized.
I think that's really great. That's a really great message for any person on who's autistic to learn, and it just perfectly aligns with what I always say about what happens when you kind of understand yourself as well. And this could be a great starting point for anyone who's a bit confused and doesn't know where to start or don't have a really sense of direction. This could be a great way to, could put you in the right direction of where you need to go in terms to find yourself. Because obviously, look, even though we're all autistic, we don't have the same traits, like I said before. So this is just one of the many examples as to what happens when you do start to learn about yourself. You become more aware and situations become easier. Situations where you used to really struggle won't be much of a struggle anymore. You know, as I said, it will take time, and no one in here is saying that this will happen overnight. So I hope you don't misinterpret that, but it's more like just understand who you are, learn more about yourself, because look, at the end of the day, we're not as bad as people say. And the more that you understand yourself, the more confident you feel. And I can tell you that from personal experience myself. And Helen, I think you're doing a great job with your blog. I believe that if people was to visit your site, they would definitely learn more about themselves just from the information that you've said to us today. I definitely think you've been saying a lot of golden knowledge here.
Oh, thank you. I'm hopefully crossing some kind of bridging some divides there between kind of my professional experience as a teacher and then as a parent and as an autistic person myself. And yeah, bridging, I try and make some of that academic research accessible for people because as you said, it's pointless just kind of sat there as well. So like when I'm writing my books, they're generally always backed up by the research that's out there and also citing other community writing and resources that are there as well. It's very much it is just me, but it's community driven. It's me that's physically sat there writing it, but like all the writing on there has been created by my interactions with other people. It's a community site, and it my journey is just like I'm just continuously learning and sharing.
I just wanted to share with you that ahead of kind of recording this episode, when I mentioned that we'll be speaking to you today, to James, who's one of the co-founders of the London Autism Group charity, he said that your website is a treasure trove of knowledge.
Oh, that's really kind. Thank
So
you.
please do go and have a look. I've had a look myself as well, and I also started to look at the map of monotropic experiences, and there's so much really, really good stuff on there. And hopefully that will help people kind of, especially if they're new to learning about autism or at the start of their journey, come away from those outdated theories that are still hanging around a little bit. So, like the lack of empathy, lack of theory of mind, and all of these things, and start to move towards theories that autistic people can actually relate to much, much more. So, yes, please do check out
Thank
Autistic.
you very much. Yeah, I've got like I think about 20 or 30 free. They're all free. Most of my stuff is free on there, or just like £1 or something. Free. I've got about 20, 30 free ebooks, and I think they've got yeah, there's probably over 1,000 infographics on there now. Like, don't know what you're going to do with all of it, but yeah, enjoy. Feel free to share, and I hope it is helpful for people. And yeah, thank you very, very much for your kind words.
But yeah, guys, 100% check out Autistic Realms. This is a perfect start for you to understanding yourself, learning what your value is. And look, you will thank us if you was to do this because this is exactly how you would better your life. I don't know how many times I have to keep on saying it, but I will keep on saying it because the one good thing about us autistics, we like routine. So it's fine if I keep on saying the same thing. If you understand yourself, you will become much better as a person. You will no longer have those self-esteem issues. You will no longer feel like a burden to society. You will see yourself as an asset to society, which is exactly what society needs anyway. Because, the pioneers are always the ones that stand out, and the pioneers are always the ones that are the unusual, the oddballs, because those are the ones that create change. Yes, it's uncomfortable for most people, but guess what? Change is uncomfortable. And I know that is practically the antithesis of what autism is about because we don't like change. But I've heard stories from many autistic people just from volunteering for the London Autism Group charity that they just want friends, they want to be in a relationship. They want to, go out and, find a community or find a space where they can really express themselves. Well, guess what, guys? That's a change, isn't it? If you want to go out and meet more people and get more friends, and actually, or if you've never had friends before, you just want to have friends in the first place who understand you, who share your interests, who want to know you and understand you for who you and accept you for who you are. That is a change. So go out there, make that change. Visit Autistic Realms, get that golden treasure knowledge, and run with it.
And just so that we don't have too much change, Simeon always ends every episode with a particular question.
Oh, yes. Thank you, Sophia.
Simeon, do you want to ask Helen the final question?
Yes, so the final question of the show, we always like to ask our guests. We probably already know most likely from what you were talking about, but what are some of your special interests?
So my current special, I've had many different special interests over the years, in like really random stuff like hula hooping and all sorts. I used to make my own hula hoops and all kinds of weird stuff. But my current special interest is in the theory of monotropism. I'm deeply involved with everything monotropism related. I support I help focus with the monotropism.org website. Nearly all of my blogs, I think there's hundreds of blogs I've written over the past 2 years now, um, are mostly monotropism related research. And yeah, that's kind of where I am, is the theory of monotropism and understanding that to support young people to help prevent burnout. I mean, yeah, my experiences of burnout have been severe, and for our own family and the many families I'm supporting are experiencing severe burnout due to kind of yes huge systemic issues and unmet needs, and I think and a misframing and a misunderstanding of autism, which is found in that very deficit way. And I think by finding out more about different theories of autism, such as monotropism. Not everybody relates to monotropism who's autistic, just to say that. But I think finding out about, thinking about how we can reframe autism, those deficits, those traits which have been categorized as kind of, so I don't want to start another podcast, restricted and repetitive interests, and talk about them as being like passions. It's reframing things in that way can really help people so much. And the younger we start supporting people and supporting education staff and retraining teachers especially, it will help people in the long term and support their well-being.
All right, that's fantastic. That's a great thing to be interested in because obviously that will make an impact on a lot of people's lives, just learning about that. I mean, I've learned a lot today.
And maybe one of the most
So,
monotropic people about monotropism
well,
currently
yeah,
around.
we
I'm not
spent the
sure.
last how many we definitely spent the last what like 40 minutes talking about this. So yeah, you've definitely shown that, 100%. But Helen, it's been
Thank you
absolutely
very much.
amazing having you on the show today. Been an absolute pleasure. You're definitely another right direction in the autistic community. It's definitely something that we need. Guys, please check out Autistic Realms. The link will be down in the description for you to check out. Please check it out.
Thank you.
Learn something today.
It's been so good talking to you, Helen. And just to say, we love a good info dump on this show. So I'm
Oh
really
yeah,
glad
100%. Oh
you got
yeah.
the opportunity to tell us all about monotropism. And I think it will be such a helpful introduction for people who may not have heard about it before or kind of know the word but are not really sure what it meant. You provided such a great overview. So thank you for being our guest today. And yeah, we look forward to following your work and seeing what comes next.
Oh, thank you very much, both of you. It's been wonderful. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you guys for listening today. Thank you, Helen, for coming on the show. And remember, guys, stay blessed and keep expanding.
We've got some exciting news. The Autism Podcast is now on Instagram. We'll be sharing updates on new episodes, behind the scenes moments, guest highlights, and inspiring quotes from our community. It's also a space for autism acceptance, advocacy, and connection. Whether you're autistic, a loved one, a professional, or just eager to learn more, come join us and help grow this incredible community. Just search for the Autism Podcast on Instagram. And if you're enjoying the show, don't forget to share it and tag a friend.
The links will be in the description below, so please check that out.